watch this.
22 books are now permanently banned in the Nampa School District. Permanently, like forever. A decision made by the school board. Why? Claims of pornography. They were the heroes of the pandemic, but now some are getting laid off. So what happens to them next? I bet we're all feeling it right now, a little tensed. But is that how the people of this small North Idaho town feel? Technically, no, because they pronounce it a little differently. And that's only part of their story. Wait till you hear how this town got its name. Well, if you're a student in Nampa Public Schools, you now have fewer reading options at the school library. On Monday, the Nampa School Board voted to permanently remove 22 books that were challenged, meaning a parent or community member brought attention to a book, believing that the book and the content inside it is simply unacceptable for school children. Now, the concern in Nampa is that books in the library, the school library, they contain pornography. A 5-person board in Nampa voted 3-2 to remove 22 books in question. And the school district tells us that the books that were challenged were evaluated by committees made up of parents, staff members, and a librarian, specifically 2 parents, 2 staff, and a librarian. Now, Nampa Schools shared a full document with findings on a list of 24 books, and one of those books was on the list twice. The other book is already out of school, so that's how we got to 22. So what books are banned in Nampa? Well, some titles you may know. The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, The Handmaid's Tale, Perks of Being a Wallflower, and Speak are among some of the lists here. And you can see there we have the duplicate crossed out, but a big list of 22 books that are now removed. So the big question here, why is this list of books removed? Well, it starts with the committee. They review books using a rubric that incorporated, in part, Common Sense Media as a criteria base. Now, Common Sense Media gives a score based on sexual content, and they also score some other things inside the book. But the sexual content is kind of what we're looking at here. Now, let's go through some examples, some specific findings, and we'll go through 2 examples here specifically. Kite Runner and 13 Reasons Why. And let's start with Kite Runner by Khalid Hosseini. It was given a 5-star rating by Common Sense Media for its educational value, but a 1 out of 5 rating for sexual content because the author there described romantic love and caring adults' desire for affection. That's the quote there. The target audience is anyone older than 16 years old. So that's one of the books that got removed and the explanation why. Let's talk about another one. 13 Reasons Why by Jay Asher, which is now a popular show on Netflix. Common Sense Media gives this book a rating of 2 out of 5 for sexual content because of its sexual innuendo, including inappropriate touching. Specifically, there's a scene in the book where a boy grabs a girl's butt. So that is written as part of the explanation there. Now, the district gave parents the opportunity to express their concerns about the books and any other books. Now, during the board meeting, Tasha Sweeney, she told the board that she and other parents that they had specific concerns about the content in the book. Here's what she had to say at the meeting on Monday.
Let's just remember that exposing kids to pornographic material is a tactic used by groomers of child predators. That's a huge thing. And you're allowing this material to be in our schools. At the last meeting that you guys had, I was asked, where do you draw the line? To me, that is a very simple answer. If you don't want the behavior to happen at school, then there shouldn't be a book about it at school. If it were a movie and it wouldn't be allowed to be played at school, there shouldn't be a book with that at school. It doesn't belong in the book. Sex has no place in school unless it is sexual education class that, as the state law, and parents may opt out their children. Not to mention that the law states that the program should supplement the work of the home and the church in giving the youth scientific and physiological information for understanding sex and the relationship to the miracle of life, including knowledge and the power of sex drive and the necessity of controlling that drive with self-discipline. In the book, one of the books on the list, It's Perfectly Normal, it suggests that there's no self-discipline when it comes to sex. And all of these books together, none of them go into having self-discipline when it comes to sex or controlling that sex drive.
So those are the types of concerns that parents and community members expressed to the Nampa School Board. Now, later in that same meeting, a board member shared her concerns, specifically about the Bible.
It's unfortunate. And again, I have to bring up the Bible because I hate to hear the Bible compared to those books because America's was based on the Judeo-Christian, the Bible, and there's a lot of good. These books have no good. And it's just, I'm sorry, that's really hard for me to hear.
And that point's being made because members of the community have pointed out that books like the Bible, the Old Testament, do include very graphic scenes. Now, during that same meeting, the board voted to suspend the current process of challenging books, expressing concerns with the process itself. So far, no procedure has replaced it, but the board says they will be talking about what to do at a future board meeting. And just to be clear here, the Nampa School Board works independently from the district office and the superintendent. I reached out to Nampa schools about how they are going to look at this new edict, and they issued a statement, and this is what they said to me, saying that this is the first time in their memory that they've ever had a book challenge, and that these banned books are not a part of any curriculum, and that parents have the ability to request that their children not be able to check out certain books. For now, they say the banned books are boxed up until they can decide what to do with them, and the Nampa School Board is expected to take that up again soon. So some uncharted territory in Nampa, and we still have a lot of questions. We reached out to each individual member of the Nampa School Board. None have responded as of 5:04 here on Wednesday. It's also unclear what future challenges could look like. So the list of 22 books is no longer available in Nampa, but that doesn't mean that the books are not available other places in the community. There's plenty of other places you can find those books. And one Treasure Valley bookstore, for example, put as many of the 22 banned books from Nampa that they had on display in their store in Boise and Caldwell. We checked in with Rediscovered Books in Boise to talk about their thoughts on books being taken out of libraries and why they're putting them front and center on a new display. Store manager and children's book specialist Rebecca Crosswhite explains more.
Brand new this morning, we got to come in and find all the books that were put out on the Nampa School District banning list and put them on display. We also put all of them that we didn't have in store right now on order, ordering in a couple extra copies just to have around, because we have a feeling people already have been calling and asking about them.
What value do you see in these books specifically?
These books specifically are just important. I mean, we have a story about drugs and how, teenage deal with that, because that's part of life. We have Speak. Speak is one of the most important books about women and speaking up and having a voice. It's perfectly normal. Is helping kids understand what's going on with their bodies. I mean, you have to talk about this stuff or else, they're going to have a hard time in life. Parents can make choices for their children, right? But they can't make choices for other parents' kids. And that's really what that's what's important about this, is you can't make that decision for others. You need to let them have that choice.
As an expert, and going through these books and knowing the sensitive subject matters inside them, I guess what thoughts were you having when you learned that they were being banned from school?
I was surprised. A lot of these books have been around for a really long time. They're not new titles. And when you're banning certain books, and we know that you're banning drama because there's a kiss between two boys in it, right? And we know that you're banning Prince and the Dressmaker because it has a romance in it. But you're telling those kids who need to see themselves in these books that that's not okay. And that's not okay to me, because they're just as important.
A community debate that is expected to go on very different sides. I did ask, though, the bookstore, I said, if there are more books that are banned in the future, will you add them to the display? They told me, yes, they would plan on doing that. Changing subjects now. For months, Idaho hospitals put a call out for more nurses to help their overwhelmed and overworked staff as COVID cases reached unmanageable levels. And today, the good news is that cases are down and most hospitals are back to more normal operations, and the need for extra healthcare workers continues to dwindle. Now, travel nurses that had been contacted and contracted to help us get through the worst of it are now coming up on the end of their contracts. And for those who are getting an offer to renew, it's at a much lower rate. According to NBC News, the demand for travel nurses nationally has dropped by a third from early March to early April. So what does this look like for us locally in the Treasure Valley and in Idaho? And what are Idaho hospitals doing to handle this tricky situation? Our Katya Stepovic reports.
This graph from one of the top travel nursing agencies in the country says it all. The demand for travel nurses in the U.S. has plummeted. During one of the recent peaks of the pandemic, there were 37,000 open positions. In April, that number dropped to 14,000. And here in Idaho,
the demand for for travelers is definitely going down.
take it from Clint Child, Chief Nursing Officer at St. Alphonsus Health System.
It's a sway back from, what was really a crisis in healthcare to getting things a little bit more under control.
St. Al's brought on upwards of 250 travel nurses to help with the demand during the pandemic.
When the need exceeds the resource there, that's when we are forced to look to, these temporary contracts.
Now, many of those travel nurses are reaching the end of their contracts.
I wouldn't say it's a layoff. It's we end when their contracts end, either we extend or we don't. So we've been able to not extend contracts and even renegotiate with their agencies some rates that then they accept or they don't. And the nurses make wages that are attractive, and they make more than a bedside nurse because it's not a permanent position. There's no benefits and things like that.
Child says St. Al's tries to offer most travel nurses the option of moving to a full-time position within the hospital.
We had a lot of healthcare workers decide to leave the industry. We've done countless stories on that. So did that kind of open up slots for travel nurses who decided to stay?
It did, and that was kind of the preface for why we had the big need initially was the increased demand and the number of people that were getting sick with COVID, as well as people that were leaving healthcare, and all of those combined really ended up with the nursing shortage that we went through.
But not all travel nurses are choosing the full-time route. The average travel nurse salary is about $156,000 a year. The average salary for a full-time registered nurse in Idaho is around $73,000, 11% lower than the national average.
They love the area, they love the working environment, but not all of them have taken on, positions with us. Many of them still want to move through and do their travel positions. So when the travel need dries up locally, they move on.
But whether the reason to move on is the money or the desire to travel, Child says for them now the focus is local and long term.
We're still down. We do focus on our internal nurses and making sure we're supporting all of them and what they do every day, while making sure that we've got enough supplemental staff to help them. But the focus is definitely on the permanent and the long-term nurses.
And I did reach out to St. Luke's to get their thoughts and what they're going through on travel nurses as well. They said in part, quote, "We have taken a thoughtful and gradual approach to level off in our hiring of travelers where possible. And while we do not anticipate a sharp drop off in our utilization of these nurses, we are working on creative and innovative ways to replace them, of course, with permanent staff." Now, that is the goal here. But regardless of that, Joe, they did tell me that pay for these travel nurses is down 45% than it was at the peak of the pandemic. So they're not getting paid as much, but some would argue more than these full-time nurses here.
Well, it's a tricky situation. It will be interesting to see how hospitals in our community and across Idaho balance that in the coming weeks, because you want to reward the people that helped you out, but if you don't need them, you don't need them. All right, Katya, thank you for that report. Primary election is 6 days away, so we wanted to take a look at some of the finances, and we wanted to take a closer look at candidates running for statewide offices and what their campaign finances look like. So the numbers we're going to show you, they include everything from 2020 until today, and it does include contributions from individual Idahoans and individuals outside of Idaho, companies, and political action committees. And all of that money under Idaho law has to be reported, and there are a lot of rules around that. For example, like all candidates must file monthly reports if they've received more than $500 in donations. And if a candidate receives a contribution of more than $1,000, they have to report it to the Secretary of State's office within 48 hours. Now, this includes normal donations, loans, and in-kind donations, or those kind of non-cash gifts, things like donating a space or services, food, no charge. So anyways, let's take a look with the race for governor. We'll start there, and it's not even close. If you look at this, incumbent Brad Little is now up to over $2 million raised. Lieutenant Governor Janice McGeehan is far behind at $710,000. Meanwhile, Ed Humphreys and Mr. Ammon Bundy have raised more than $400,000. Democrat Shelby Rongstad, who is technically a write-in candidate, has raised about $217,000. A lot of money in the governor's race. Let's take a look, though, at the race for lieutenant governor. Current Speaker of the House, Scott Bedke, leads Representative Priscilla Giddings in a close financial race. You see, really close. Boise Democrat Terry Pickens Manweiler is a distant third. Let's pop over to the race for Idaho Attorney General. Former Congressman Raul Labrador is leading the way with nearly $600,000 raised. Longtime incumbent Lawrence Wasden sits behind him with more than $450,000 raised, and Coeur d'Alene attorney Art McComber, you can see there, he has raised a little more than $135,000. Secretary of State, Ada County Clerk Phil McGrain is outraising his opponents, and he's raised nearly double that of his opponents, about $403,000. Representative Dorothy Moons raised $226,000, and Senator Mary Souza has raised about $121,000. Finally, that race for state superintendent, there we go, not even close. Debbie Critchfield has raised nearly $320,000. Brandon Durst is in a far second at nearly $68,000. And in third, the incumbent, Sherry Ibarra, raised just over $35,000 there. If we add all the money, plus the money raised by candidates in every other race, over $36 million have been raised so far in this season of Idaho elections. Okay, so with all that said, does the money actually matter at the end of the day? Do what we show you, is that any indication who will win? Does the candidate that raised the most money have a better chance? Well, we talked with Dr. Stephanie Witt, a political science professor over at Boise State. And Dr. Witt says she doesn't know or of any particular correlation or rate at which having raised money means more wins. But she does say that by having more money, candidates are able to buy more advertising, which helps get their name out for name recognition. But even that is not always a predictor of victory. Sometimes less funded candidates do win. And as the election inches closer, our inbox has started to fill up with messages about the primary election, and we love that. Keep connecting with us. You can text us anytime. With that said, though, our inbox has turned into an outlet of sorts for some viewers to let out frustrations about all things politics. Keep them coming. But amid those messages, we do find legitimate questions, like this one from Greg, who asks, who is paying for these incessant political ads? That is a great question, and the short answer is it's the candidates themselves, political action committees, also known as PACs, and sometimes it's even other third parties. And there are very strict rules when it comes to actually getting an ad to air on a place like here on Channel 7. The rules are set by the Federal Communications Commission, and those rules must be followed not only by the candidates and the PACs, but by the TV and radio stations that broadcast them. Some of these rules may sound familiar, simply because you've seen and heard so many political ads in the last few weeks, like this one, that says, the advertisement must identify the candidate by name, say that the candidate approves the message on the ad, and say who paid for the ad. So in this case, candidate John Smith approves the message, and it was paid for by John Smith for governor. And that writing has to be in a clearly readable manner for at least 4 seconds. So you can't do any tricks, no clever editing. You gotta follow the rules. And if it's not followed, there could be big fines to pay. But what about if it's an ad by a third party, meaning whoever bought the ad time is advocating against a candidate or a candidate that didn't approve the ad? Specifically in that case, they must make clear that it was not an authorized ad by the candidate. They must say something like paid for or sponsored by the people against John Smith, and this ad is not authorized by the other candidate. So you have to be very clear here. We have to have transparency in this election cycle, even if it can be subtle. Now, there are just some of the rules. There's a lot more, and the rules are even more stringent for candidates running for federal office. As always, keep sending us your questions. We love answering them. Remember in school when you were learning to spell, sometimes you would write a letter backwards, like your R's and your E's, or sometimes you would maybe spell a word backwards on accident? No, just me, that's fine. It turns out, though, there's a city in Idaho whose name is backwards of what it's actually supposed to be. And we're not talking about Star. This north town is not only spelled backwards, it's misspelled backwards.
Way up north along the western edge of Idaho sits the city they call the gateway to McCroskey State Park, a town with a name that, well, isn't really what it looks like.
Tensed.
Not tensed.
Correct. It is not tensed.
It would be tough to be tensed in a town with just 123 people in it.
I don't know where those people are at, but that's what the sign says, so.
And it's a pretty place, too, with the Palouse to the west and St. Joe National Forest to the east.
Yeah, a real beautiful area.
A place where people would go to relax instead of if they were tensed, maybe.
Yes, exactly.
A full-fledged city, complete with a city hall, a church, a bar, a bakery, and a little store they call the Big Store, with stuff galore. So you see, basically laid back.
That's kind of the joke, you know. I mean, we are tensed here, but
Karen Owen has lived here for 17 years.
I don't know everything, even though I am a librarian.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why we wanted to ask her, how did Tensed get to be, well, Tensed? Way back when the Panhandle people were tired of living in tents, they needed a moniker for the new metropolis. So they went with De Smet. You know, after Pierre-Jean de Smet, the well-known Jesuit missionary who was kind of a big Belgian deal in the area a while back. But that title was already taken by the town just a mile and a half away. Oops. So someone came up with the brilliant idea of spelling De Smet backwards.
But when the name change reached the officials or wherever, it was misprinted as Tensed with an N instead of the M.
Another oops. And the town of Tensed never looked back or tried to change it back.
I don't know, how would you say it if it was an M?
Tempsed. I like Tensed actually better. Because then we can joke about it. We're tensed. Ah.
Well, actually, they're really relaxed about their mistaken identity.
Well, I guess for not known for anything else, but you're known because you've been misspelled.
Well, I guess that's okay.
All right, friends, you always ask, where can we get some more 208 content for you? We are on all the platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Gmail. We're on all the social platforms. You can connect with us there. Please do. We did run out of time today. There was a lot of great comments. We will get to them on Friday when I'm back as the host. Brian should be back tomorrow. We appreciate you joining us. We'll see you tomorrow.